In this video, Jordan Peterson talks about how people can make a mistake in assuming they're leading while in reality they're dropping out.
Sure, well that's exactly why I made reference to what happened in the 60s. You know, because the idea then, part of that was because people thought the Vietnam War was staggeringly unjust, and part of that was because people were pretty tortured existentially by the underground battle between communism and the West, roughly speaking, which was, you know, breaking out all over the world, including in Vietnam. So there was a lot of underground turmoil, but that doesn't mean you get to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, and Timothy Leary was a good example of that. Turn on, so that's the LSD. Tune in, drop out. It's like, no. Turn on, wake up, and adopt some responsibility. You know, and so, but you see, because as soon as you go to drop out, you think, well, are you running away or leading? And Nietzsche would say, you're running away. That's what you're doing. The probability that you're leading is vanishingly small. The probability that you're deluding yourself about being a leader when you drop out is exceedingly high. So the right assumption is if you drop out, you're useless and lazy, as well as arrogant and resentful. And you should start with that presumption and then go through, you know, cataclysmic soul searching to see if maybe it might not be true. It's true. You know, well, what's the probability? You know, saint or loser? Well, there's so few saints that you just using baseline predictions, you know, actuarial tables, you have to assume loser. So, you know, and if you're a loser who thinks they're a saint, well, then you're going to cause an awful lot of trouble. You know, so, and a lot of that happened in the 60s. So, you know, the 60s generation likes to think about themselves as admirable rebels. It's like, yeah, let's check a bit for some self-serving tendencies there. You know, like the refusal to adopt responsibility. And that's always lurking underneath like a revolutionary facade. So, you know, and I think that's had an absolutely pernicious influence on the universities, especially the humanities, which are dropping in enrollment, cataclysmically deteriorating in influence, and based far more on, you know, what would you call it? The idea that you have a moral imperative to be a radical activist. It's like, no, you have a moral imperative to be useful and honest. That's a whole different thing. You know, if you want to change things, like, fair enough. But don't be thinking that change isn't dangerous and that you're right. It's highly unlikely. So anyways, my point is, there's an archetypal way of representing the Great Father, and the archetypal way is tyrant or benevolent dictator. It's something like that, and you don't get to just say one of them. Now, you know, here's a way of thinking about it historically. You could say that once, like these are archetypal and religious representations, so you could say, well, roughly that's God the Father, and God the Father you see there is ruling over a walled city. And the walled city is the Father as well, because it's an enclosed space that's keeping chaos out. And there's a hierarchy in there, a dominance hierarchy, and everybody's slotted in the hierarchy. And you could think of the dominance hierarchy and the value hierarchy as the thing that manifests itself as the Father, symbolically speaking. So, and that you're protected by the fact of the hierarchy, even though it also oppresses the hell out of you. Maybe you're like a serf, you know, but maybe it's better to be a serf than to be someone alone in the middle of a battlefield, you know. That's certainly possible. You can make a case for that anyways. So then you look at that and you think, well, is that tyranny or security? And the answer is, well, it's both. And what's the balance? And what you hope is, well, let's have a little more security than tyranny. And then what's your moral duty? Well, to ensure that the Great Father, who you are not bloody well going to get rid of, and you better not, because you'll end up like the Mesopotamians when they slew Apsu. You remember what happened to them, right? Apsu was Tiamat's consort. He was the masculine element, chaos and order. As soon as the ancient gods were formed, they made a lot of racket, and they were really careless, and they killed Apsu, and then they lived on his corpse. Well, that's not a very good idea, because then Tiamat comes, you know, swarming back, and the probability that she's going to do you in with all her monsters, unless you really pay attention and speak properly, is very, very high. You know, the Mesopotamians had that figured out. Well, they had it figured out in image. It's an absolutely remarkable story.